You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, and you're not. I've got to start with the Mets, namely their GM being arrested for driving while intoxicated. It is important to note that he was arraigned today. He pleaded not guilty. He'll be back in court next month, and we need to let the process play out. Let the criminal justice system do what it needs to do. To speculate on Scott's innocence or guilt at this point would be wildly inappropriate. But I will echo something that I said during the whole thumbs down debacle. Steve Cohen is no better than the Wilpons. He comes in with all this fanfare. Because the Wilpons were not good New York owners. It's not that they were bad owners per se. They were bad owners for New York. They did put a lot of money into the team. The Mets did have 9-digit payrolls. But when you see the Yankees blowing past the luxury tax, and you see all these free agents that the Yankees aren't interested in, you should go out and be aggressive. I mean, who's the biggest free agent that the Mets have ever signed? Jason Bay? Yoenis Cespedes? That's not enough for New York. The other reason why Cohen was being extolled by Mets fans was because he has a ton of money. I'm like 99% sure he is the richest owner in baseball. Maybe one of the richest owners in all of professional sports. And he comes in saying all the right things. Yeah, we're going to spend money. Yeah, we're going to run this organization the right way. I remember he said something to the effect of, I didn't buy the Mets to make money. I bought them to lead them to a championship. So it seemed like he was open to losing money if it meant winning. Like, he wasn't going to let any dollar amount stand in his way. So, great. Fantastic. If you're a Mets fan, you've got to love this. And look, there was a point while the Yankees were letting the offseason play out that the Mets were being aggressive. They signed James McCann. They signed Trevor May. They obviously traded for Lindor and Carrasco. I mean, you can go back to some of the older shows. I said that the Mets were the kings of New York. Now, forget about it. Forget the fact that the Mets are 2 games under 500 and have no chance of making the playoffs. The Mets organization is being run just as poorly as it was under the Wilpons. Think of all the headaches that the Mets have had just this calendar year. The Mickey Callaway stuff, Jared Porter being forced to resign, the GameStop stock controversy, Mets players openly disrespecting their fans. Now this, a DWI charge from your GM? Just when you thought things were turning around for the Mets, they had won 4 straight. Javier Baez scored the game-winning run against the Marlins on Tuesday. This happens. The New York Mets simply cannot get out of their own way with their ineptitude. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And at the end of the day, that's on the owner. But even more so than that, realize what Scott was doing before he was arrested by the police. He was at Steve Cohen's house for a team fundraiser. He was there with players, with other members of the front office, and this guy allegedly got so hammered that he pulled over on a White Plains highway, was sleeping in his car, and failed a field sobriety test. I watch Bar Rescue with my father, and we love it. It's one of our favorite shows. One thing that the host, John Taffer, really drills into people is that when you're serving alcohol, you have a responsibility to make sure that these people don't drink to excess. If you see that someone's inebriated, cut them off. And for God's sake, if you're the owner of the team, say to Scott, here's a spare bedroom, sleep it off. That's a hell of a lot better than having the GM pulled over on the highway and having him sleep in his car. I mean, my God. This guy could have killed someone. If you're driving while intoxicated, you can kill someone. Zach Scott should count himself as a very, very lucky person right now that he didn't run over someone or didn't plow into a car. It is your responsibility as the host of the party to make sure that everyone stays safe. Letting someone drink to excess is not keeping everyone safe. Now, I will play devil's advocate. I've seen people drink to the point where they're legally intoxicated. Like, they're past the .08 threshold in New York. But they're fine. Like, you wouldn't know they were intoxicated if you didn't see them drinking all night. They can still carry a conversation. They're not slurring their speech. They're still coordinated. Like, they're fine. So maybe no one at this charity event knew that Scott was inebriated. It's at least conceivable that that happened. Also, the arrest happened at 4:17 in the morning. The officer who arrested Scott said that he was driving erratically. It's very possible that Scott was just tired. The guy was up until 4 a.m. and he has to drive home. As we all know, alcohol can make you sleepy. It's possible that that's all this was. I don't want to make any presumptions on Scott's guilt or innocence, but there's no question that this is a terrible look for Steve Cohen. It's bad enough that your GM was arrested, but to have him arrested because of something that happened at your house, that's just ridiculous. Steve Cohen needs to take a look in the mirror and realize how to properly run a baseball team. And for God's sake, if you're having a party that's lasting through the wee hours of the morning, say to the people who are still there, hey, stay over tonight. I don't want you out on the road. Oh yeah, it's 4 a.m. and I've consumed multiple adult beverages, but don't worry, I'm still okay to drive. I'll just roll all the windows down and crank up the radio. This is just a terrible look for Steve Cohen, a man who I don't think is any better than the Wilpons. Oh, and actually, in breaking news, Zach Scott is now on administrative leave until further notice. Sandy Alderson is now the interim GM. So Steve Cohen has been Mets owner for under a year, and he's had 3 GMs. Jared Porter, Zach Scott, and Sandy Alderson. Way to pick him, Steve. Moving on now to Major League Baseball proposing a very interesting change to free agency. Under the current system, if you accrue 6 years of MLB service, at the end of that season, you become a free agent. And that has led to teams keeping top prospects in the minors for longer periods of time than they should have because they want to gain that extra year of service. Major League Baseball proposed a change to how you determine free agency. According to Joel Sherman of the New York Post, Major League Baseball proposed making players eligible for free agency at the end of the season where they turn 29 and a half years old. Firstly, let me just say that that is an absolutely terrible idea. If you're going to do something like this, you can't have it at half a year. So let me get this straight. What happens if at the end of the season, I'm 29 years, 5 months, and 25 days old? That's not half a year. I can't become a free agent. Making it half a year just seems really arbitrary. It doesn't matter if it's 29 and a half, 30 and a half, 28 and a half. It doesn't matter. It can't be a half. I mean, half birthdays mean nothing. Who on earth celebrates a half birthday? That's like something out of Alice in Wonderland with the unbirthday. At 15 and a half years old, you can't get a learner's permit on how to drive in the state of New York. You've got to be 16. You can get a learner's permit on your 16th birthday. On your 18th birthday, you can go in the Army. Not 17 years and 6 months. In order to actually enlist in the Army, you've got to be 18. In order to drink, in order to buy a gun in this state, not 20 and a half, 21. To vote, not 17 and a half, 18. To rent a car, not 24 and a half, 25. Where's this half birthday coming from? That makes no sense to me. But I've spoken in the past about service time manipulation. It is a big deal. Tying free agency to a player's age as opposed to service time is something that I didn't think about. And whoever first thought of this should be commended. Alright, that person's thinking outside the box. Good job by him or her. In the past, I proposed something similar to what the CHL does. You grant a player exceptional player status so that person can play above their age level. Get a group of experts together and determine what players don't need any more time in the minors. They're ready to go and rake in the majors. I didn't think about tying it to a player's age. I actually think that's a pretty good idea. That does away with the problem of service time manipulation. It's not like you can manipulate someone's birthday. If their birth certificate says they were born on this day, yeah, they were born on that day. Nothing we can do about that. I mean, in some cases, some players coming from Latin America have had forged birth certificates, but that's very, very rare. The thing is, though, is there a magic age that's okay for players to hit free agency? If this system was enacted and it's 29 or 29 and a half, Aaron Judge is a free agent. He's set to be a free agent at the end of not this season, but the season after. To make him a free agent now, a season where he's stayed healthy, his second 30 home run season, his third All-Star season, a season where he'll get MVP votes, that's huge. Also, think about this. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was signed by the Blue Jays when he was 16. He is set to become a free agent in 2026. He'd hit free agency at 27 years of age. To give the Blue Jays 2 extra years of team control for Guerrero would be incredible. What a coup for Toronto. What a coup for the Nationals, for Juan Soto. He was signed at the tender age of 16. He'll be a free agent when he's 27. You're going to give the Nationals 2 extra years? Wow, the Nationals' window to win just got extended a little bit. I don't think there's an age that you can decree should be the universal age for free agency in Major League Baseball. I just don't think that works. It's a good idea, it's a good thought, but once you play it out, I just don't think it works. I don't think you can treat all these players as equal. I mean, think about it this way. A guy like Judge was 25 his rookie season. When he hit 52 home runs and got robbed of MVP, he was 25. You know how old Juan Soto was when he first came up and was runner-up in Rookie of the Year voting to Ronald Acuna Jr.? He was 19. So here's a guy in Soto who was so talented that he came up at 19 versus a guy like Judge who needed a little more seasoning in the minors and didn't really hit his stride until he turned 25. So for Judge, the system is more fair. He gets to hit free agency sooner. But for Soto, it's, wait a minute. I have to wait to get my money? Because I produced at an earlier age? I'm punished for that? Because these other players took a little bit more time to get good? That's unfair. I don't think a universal age works. It's a good idea, but I think you need to take every free agency case individually. I think service time is the way to go. Alright, now I'll give you some NHL Vault Talk. And when I went through all the Islanders signings yesterday, I didn't mention Zach Parisi. A couple of my friends reached out to me and said, Jacob, why didn't you mention Parisi? He wasn't announced. It's just that simple. We had no confirmation that he was coming to the island. In all fairness, he still hasn't had his contract finalized by Lou Lamoriello, but according to Michael Russo of The Athletic, he's the Wild beat writer, Zach Parisi will be an Islander like his father was. I've spoken in the past about the possibility of Parisi coming to the Islanders. But now that the team has been fleshed out a little bit, let's think about where Parisi fits on the island. The only answer is third line left wing. You're not going to put him on the top line. That's Lee, Barzell, Palmieri. You're not going to put him on the second line. That's Beauvillier, Nelson, Bailey. And you're not going to break up the identity line. That leaves the third line. So it seems like it's going to be Parisi, Pajot, and Wahlstrom. Now that's a really good third line. Like, the Islanders can roll out 4 really, really good lines next year. There is no weak spot in their forward core. You want to tell me they have a hole on defense? Hey, I'm with you there. The fact that the Islanders haven't added another defenseman is concerning to me, but there's still a little bit of time. I've learned to not question Lou Lamoriello. Alright, every time I did that, I looked like an idiot afterwards, so I've just come to realize that this man knows more about hockey than any of us mere mortals. There's a reason that he's a Hall of Famer. In Lou we trust. I'd like to think that he has something cooking. Especially because the Islanders have a lot of forward depth. And the Islanders have traded a lot of draft picks recently. I'm not mad at that. But I don't know if I want to trade any more draft picks. I'd rather trade from my surplus. There are two ways of pulling off trades in sports. The first one is trading draft picks and or prospects. You can combine the two because they're both pieces of paper. And the second way is dealing from your surplus. You just saw the Yankees do it. They had a bunch of B prospects. They traded them for Rizzo, Gallo, and Heaney. Even going a little further back, they had a bunch of outfielders. They traded Mike Tauchman for Wandy Peralta. You can deal from your surplus. And in addition to the 12 forwards that I already mentioned, the Islanders have Komarov, they have Richard Panik, they have Ross Johnston, they have Kiefer Bellows, they have Otto Koivula, they have Anatoly Golashev. I'll even throw Austin Zarnik in there, why not? They have a ton of forward depth. I just gave you 19 forwards that can, at the very least, hold their own in the NHL. So you've got to think that Lamoriello realizes that, because if a mere mortal like me can realize it, a genius like Lamoriello can also. I think before the season starts, you'll see a trade involving the Islanders giving up some of their forward depth for a lefty defenseman. Because as it stands right now, their D-men are Pelican Pollock, Green and Dobson, and Sebastian Aho and Mayfield. All due respect to Sebastian Aho, I want to win a Stanley Cup this year. Playing Aho doesn't give me the best chance of seeing my team open up UBS Arena with a Stanley Cup. Now, Arthur Staple, in an article for The Athletic, threw out some possibilities. Let's run through them. He noted that the Kraken have a bunch of lefty defensemen. Do the Kraken need extra forwards? They probably wouldn't be interested in guys like Komarov and Panik and Johnston, but you gotta think that some of the younger guys like Bellows and Koivula, would interest the Kraken. You go through the lefty defensemen that the Kraken have. Dennis Cholowski, Vince Dunn, the Kraken wouldn't trade. Hayden Fleury, no. Mark Giordano, the Kraken wouldn't trade. Jeremy Lauzon would make a little bit of sense. Jamie Oleksiak, the Kraken just signed. Gustav Olofsson, absolutely not. The guy who would really interest me would be Carson Soucy. A guy who put up a couple really good years for the Wild. In 1920, he put up 14 points in 55 games. He was a plus 16. Last year, he put up 17 points in 50 games. He was a plus 22. I'd love Carson Soucy on the Islanders. That would make a ton of sense. Staple also threw out Hampus Lindholm. He's good. The thing is, though, he's due to make $5,205,556 this year, and then he can become an unrestricted free agent. You look at a guy like Soucy, he's making $2.75 million for the next 2 years. I feel like I'd prefer Soucy. Vladislav Gavrikov was mentioned. He's 2 years younger than Soucy, and they're on similar contracts. Gavrikov is signed for $2.8 million for the next 2 years. Then he can become a UFA. The thing is, though, I don't think the Blue Jackets would trade Gavrikov for a bunch of forwards. I think they'd want high picks. That's not what I want to give up in this type of a trade. If given the choice between Soucy for extra forwards or Gavrikov for high picks, I'm taking Soucy. And the same thing holds for Mattias Ekholm. There's no way that the Predators would trade Ekholm, someone who's been there his whole career, an alternate captain, and a franchise stalwart, for a bunch of extra forwards. So all in all, what the Parisi signing tells me is that the Islanders are looking to trade some of their extra forwards for a lefty defenseman. Someone who can play with Dobson on the second line. And Carson Soucy would make a ton of sense. It's kind of funny, bringing in a former member of the Wild leads to a trade for another former member of the Wild. Kind of interesting how things like that work out. Moving on now to the Blues, signing Colton Perrico to an 8-year extension worth $52 million. That's an AAV of $6.5 million. And this is an overpay. There's no way on this earth that Colton Perrico is worth $6.5 million. Look, Parayko's a good player. Good two-way defenseman. Plays the game the right way. Doesn't take a lot of penalties. Really good player. But to give him $6.5 million when this guy has never had more than 35 points in a season? Come on, that's absurd. Last year he got hurt. He only played in 32 games. he had just 12 points and was a -2. You're going to give a guy like that a $52 million extension? That's absurd. This is a terrible move by the Blues. This is a massive overpay. This is going to become an albatross for the Blues very quickly. Perrico's a good player, but this is an absolutely egregious overpay. The opposite of that is what the Sabres just did with Casey Mittelstadt. They signed him to a 3-year extension worth $7.5 million. This is a great move by the Sabres. If the Sabres have any building blocks, guys who they wouldn't trade for anything, Mittelstadt is one of those guys. I'm not sure if I can endorse them having any building blocks, because I think the best thing for that organization is just to blow things up to kingdom come. But if you want to build around guys like Mittelstadt, Dahlin, and Dylan Cousins, I'm okay with that. Last year, Mittelstadt had 22 points in 41 games. Not great, but that actually is the 4th most points by a Sabre last year. He had 10 goals, the 3rd most goals by a Sabre last year. He was a -10, but for a team as bad as the Sabres, that's actually not a bad number, -10. I like Mittelstadt. I like him a lot. I think he has a ton of talent. It's not too often that you can say this, but this is a great move by the Sabres. Moving on now to the Flyers, signing Joel Farabee to a 6-year extension worth $30 million. And this is another outstanding move. Farabee seems like he's going to get better and better every year he's in the NHL. He came into the league in his age 19 season. He played 52 games. He had 21 points. He followed that up by playing in 55 games and recording 38 points and 20 goals. The Flyers are a little bit of an older team. You take a look at their core, it's full of veterans. Guys like Kevin Hayes, Ryan Ellis, James Van Riemsdyk, Cam Atkinson, Claude Giroux, Sean Couturier, etc., etc. You've got to balance that out with some young guns. Farabee is, without question, one of the best young players in all of hockey. This guy's 21 years old and already has a 20-goal season to his name. I really like him. The sky's the limit for this kid. Massively underrated. I'm not looking forward to having to deal with him for the next possibly 15 years or so. In breaking NHL news, the Sabres just locked up another young gun for 3 years at $7.5 million. This time, it's Henri Jokiharju committing long-term to the Sabres. An interesting move. I can't say I hate it. I can't say I love it. I don't look at Jokiharju as a building block for the Sabres. He's not a bad player. He's young. He's 22. He has some potential, but what's his ceiling? Top 4 defenseman? And even then, not a great top 4 defenseman? I didn't think you needed to commit long-term to Jokiharju, but I understand why the Sabres did. His first year in Buffalo, he had 15 points in 69 games. Last year, he had 8 points in 46 games. Like I said, he's not a bad player. If this was another team, I'd be more okay with it, but I don't want the Sabres committing long-term to guys who it's not ironclad that they can be key members of the next Sabres playoff team. Way, way, way down the line. Yoki Harju doesn't fit into that description, in my opinion. I'll close this show out with some NBA Vault Talk, specifically on my beloved Brooklyn Nets. Shams Charania of The Athletic tweeted out that the Nets are going to sign Paul Millsap and are the front runner for LaMarcus Aldridge. Let's start with Millsap. I've said in the past that I didn't want Millsap on the Nets. I thought it was clearly obvious that he lost a step. You know, it's clear that he's not the great defender that he once was. It's clear that he's not the great scorer that he once was. I'm not a big Millsap fan. But the thing is, though, we've seen the Nets bring in these older players and breathe new life into them. Blake Griffin looked like a completely different player with the Nets than he was with the Pistons. LaMarcus Aldridge looked like a different player with the Nets than he was with the Spurs. Also, if a 4-time All-Star is willing to sign a veteran's minimum deal with you so that he can chase his first ring with your team, it's tough to say no to that. I'm not crazy about this move. I understand the logic behind it. And I'm not sure how much Millsap is going to play. So I really can't get too upset about it. Especially since the Nets are evidently really close to bringing back LaMarcus Aldridge. He received medical clearance to play in the NBA again. I mean, if LaMarcus Aldridge is with the Nets against the Bucks, that series ends differently. The Nets beat the Bucks in Game 3. They probably beat the Bucks in Game 7. They'd probably be NBA champions. That's how great LaMarcus Aldridge was for the Nets. And that's not hyperbole. This guy was fantastic with the Nets. Through 5 games, it was like, oh my god. This guy is the absolutely perfect fit for the Nets. James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, and LaMarcus Aldridge. How are you beating that? Then Aldridge retired, and those dreams went away. See, the thing that the Nets are doing here is they're adding depth. You know that James Harden is going to take some off days. You know that Kyrie Irving is going to take some off days. You know that Kevin Durant is going to take some off days. You know that Blake Griffin is going to take some off days. You've still got to win those games. Like, think about this roster for a minute. James Harden, Patrick Mills, Javon Carter, Kyrie Irving, Cam Thomas, Kevin Durant, Joe Harris, Bruce Brown, DeAndre Bembry, Paul Millsap, Blake Griffin, James Johnson, LaMarcus Aldridge, Nick Claxton, and Day'Ron Sharpe. How are you beating that team? The Lakers cannot beat that team. There's no team in the NBA that could beat that team in a 7-game series. I don't care if the Nets are bitten by the injury bug again. They have the depth necessary to withstand it. This is probably how I would have the rotation. I was just rattling off at Brooklyn Nets 85's tweet. And I retweeted it at Real Jacob Valk. This is how I would probably arrange the rotation if I was Steve Nash. James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, Blake Griffin, LaMarcus Aldridge. And off the bench, Patty Mills, Bruce Brown, Joe Harris, Paul Millsap, and Nick Claxton. That's unbeatable. I mean, think about the players that I didn't mention. I didn't mention Cam Thomas and Day'Ron Sharpe. They were just taken in the first round of this past NBA draft. I didn't mention Javon Carter. Really good perimeter defender. I didn't mention DeAndre Bembry. Another good defender. I didn't mention James Johnson. A Patrick Beverley type. The Nets are prepared for anything that the season throws at them. The injury bug, the coronavirus, other teams getting better. I don't see how the Brooklyn Nets lose the NBA title this year. This is the Nets' year. If they don't win this year, they're cursed. It's just that simple. And I will say this about Millsap, in all fairness to him. He was asked to start for the Nuggets a lot. He was asked to play over 20 minutes a game. He's probably not going to be asked to do that with the Nets. So, I think it's fair to expect that Millsap will be better because he's handling less of a workload. I'm telling you, the Nets-Lakers NBA Finals that we're probably going to get in 9 months is going to be nothing short of sensational. Until tomorrow, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.